We are just 2 days away from the start of the NFL season, so we thought we'd bring you guys a fun video. Tomorrow, we're going to have some trade targets that we're talking about, but we're going to go through and just break down our my guys. We're going to go through like a fantasy football lineup style, quarterback, running backs, wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex, and talk about the guys that we are live and dying by this season. Come December, come January, we're either going to victory lap these takes or we're going to face palm these takes because these players ended up being terrible. So this one should be really fun. Me and Danny are going to go draft style, snake style draft and draft our my guys and fill out a fantasy lineup. So if you guys enjoy at any point, leave a like, subscribe to the channel down below, and also leave any comments of who you really like this year. Who are your my guys? Who are you live and dying by? So without further ado, Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And yeah, the majority of these guys we've already made, detailed cases for. So this is just going to be a fun style video. We're, shooting the shit, talking some football, guys that we just want on our fantasy teams, point blank and simple. And this is the type of video where after the year, if you guys want to hold us accountable, if you want to say, hey, listen, one of these guys in the video, the RB2 that you mentioned, ended up completely face planting, ended up completely dog shit, you can remind us after the year. Because at the end of the day, this is just fun.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of these guys, too, we have high exposures to on Underdog. I'll probably reference my exposure to these players as we're going through them. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. All right, so if you guys skip the intro, basically what we're going to be doing with all of these players, we flipped a coin, heads or tails. I got the first pick. We're going to be doing a snake-style draft, filling out a fantasy football lineup with our my guys. So we have a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex. I got the first pick, which means I'm going with, of course, Bijan Robinson, who is my guy. He's the number one dude that I've been standing this entire offseason. I'm sure you guys very much reference our takes when it comes to Bijan Robinson when you're talking to your buddies or whatever. So Bijan, he has the legendary upside that I'm looking for at running back, point blank simple. My expectation is that he achieves said legendary upside at running back because he went to the one of the most run heavy teams in the NFL. Generational prospect, elite offensive line. You guys have heard the case over and over again for Bijan Robinson. The market expectation for him is that he's like a first round player, top 5 overall running back, because Algier is going to work in, Cordero Patterson's going to work in. We don't really know what to expect out of Desmond Ridder, but my expectation is that Bijan is the key to unlocking this offense. They win 10 or 11 games this year, and Bijan is the RB1 in fantasy.
Yeah, I agree. And like you mentioned that Bijan Robinson is an FSC staple because, every time I go in public, the one player I'm reminded of about us is the fact that we have Bijan Robinson way ahead of consensus. Like you said, some people view him on, that late first, like early second round area. He is both of our 3rd overall players. And I agree, given the fact that in our bold predictions video, I literally said he would be the running back 1 with a legendary season and going 101 in next year's draft. So if you didn't take him at 101 in this draft, I definitely would have as well. Both of our my guys, specifically yours in this video. For my overall my guy, my 2nd overall pick, I'm going with the Cowboy jerseys behind me. You see the 88. I got to go with my boy CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver of the Dallas Cowboys. And the expectation for him at this point is that, he'll figure into that wide receiver 7, wide receiver 11 range. Typically a guy you will see being had at the late first round to early to mid second round. I've even seen him in some drafts. My expectation is that he contends for top 3 to 5 overall wide receiver status. We got a 24-year-old wide receiver entering his 4th year. People are kind of adjusting their expectations right now as if he's peaked as a player, as if, 1350, 10 touchdowns is about the range of outcome we can expect on a year-to-year basis from CeeDee Lamb. My expectation is that entering year 4, we can maybe see an ascension. We can maybe see him put up a Jamar Chase level stat line. Obviously, that's high expectation, but if he were to have 110 receptions, 1,500 plus receiving yards, 10, 11 plus receiving touchdowns, I do think that's a range of outcome that I can expect. I still think this Cowboys offense is going to be good. I think giving more control towards Dak Prescott in terms of play calling, in terms of lines at the scrimmage, can only help in terms of just keeping it simple. I felt like a lot of times last year, the Cowboys were a little bit dysfunctional, a little bit, unorganized. I feel like this year, keeping it simple, feeding your playmaker and CeeDee Lamb is going to be the recipe for success.
Yeah, Lamb in a contract year as well. He's my 2nd highest rostered player behind Bijan Robinson in the first round. I have him at 13% or 13.5%, and then Bijan up at 20%. So I also agree. Danny's obviously biased because he's a Cowboys fan, but I'm pretty much on the same page with CeeDee Lamb, and I'm not a Cowboys fan. So I really like his outlook as well. I think he has a chance to finish as a top 3 receiver. Who did you go? So that was the first round. Danny's coming back. It's a snake style draft. Who you taking with your 103 here?
And with the reference of the bowl predictions video in mind, my number 3 overall player is going to be Garrett Wilson. If you guys watched that video, you would have saw the high praise I had for Garrett Wilson. Basically, the exact expectation I laid out for CeeDee Lamb. I also see that potentially working out for Garrett Wilson. The big difference why I prefer Lamb is that he's already shown, of course, in his 3rd year that he can be a 1,300 plus yard wide receiver. But just because Garrett Wilson hasn't shown it doesn't mean he can't do it. This was a rookie wide receiver who had 147 targets last year, over 1,000 receiving yards. Now gets a guy in Aaron Rodgers who was the 2020, 2021 back-to-back MVP. If Aaron Rodgers can unlock maybe not even that level of play, but like 90, 95% of it, there's a world right here where Garrett Wilson is the 3rd overall pick in fantasy drafts next year. And I would rather be a year too early than a year too late.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have to wait for Garrett Wilson to do it, you're going to miss the boat. You're going to do what people did in 2021 when they missed the boat on Justin Jefferson after his rookie season. And Garrett Wilson now, I mean, if you watch Hard Knocks, it's hard not to get excited about this guy. Garrett Wilson, Aaron Rodgers connect for a touchdown. He goes, that's the first of many, buddy. Like, that's exactly the type of energy that we're getting from this Jets offense, and specifically from the Aaron Rodgers to Garrett Wilson connection. So, speaking of the Jets, you have your 2 my guys, your wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 with CeeDee Lamb and Garrett Wilson. My running back 2 that I'm going to fill out with this pick is also on the New York Jets. Breece Hall, currently my highest rostered running back on Underdog Fantasy overall. 27% of my teams I've drafted Breece Hall. Because simply, especially in this type of tournament, in Underdog Fantasy Best Ball Mania 4, all of the money is at the top. I want the elite upside. I literally drafted this guy in my home league draft in the mid-3rd round last night as well. Breece Hall has legendary upside the same way that Bijan Robinson does. I understand the market expectation is that Dalvin Cook's going to work in. He's going to be a thorn in Breece Hall's side the entire season. I don't see it that way. Everything that the Jets have said since they signed Dalvin Cook is that this is protection against Breece Hall re-aggravating his knee. They're going to ramp him up. They're going to, first couple weeks of the season, he's probably not going to be dominant like I expect him to be towards the end of the season. But if you can get by, if you draft Raheem Mostert and Deion Jackson late on in your drafts, and you can afford to not play Breece Hall, maybe even in your lineup period, but definitely not as like your RB1, your dominant piece early on in the season. I think Breece Hall could absolutely pay off in a big way down the stretch last year. This is a high-end running back prospect, elite athleticism. He's ahead of schedule on his injury, and he has the target commanding upside in an offense, by the way, that really only has Garrett Wilson. There's nobody really else to command a lot of targets in that offense. I think by week 5 to week 8, we're talking about a guy who's a 70% opportunity share running back. And at the price tag that you're getting him, 4th round price tags are where he's gone in most home leagues, most underdog drafts as well. Breece Hall at 104 is my guy. I really expect this guy to have a monster second half of the season.
Yeah, I love the Breece Hall take. He's a guy that I would fully feel comfortable taking in that mid-3rd round area. Like you mentioned with your home league, I think you got him at the 3-7. I'm more than comfortable taking him there because while I do expect, like you said, maybe Dalvin in the first couple weeks works in while Breece is fully getting back up to speed. But come week 3, come week 4 on, I think this is Breece Hall's backfield to lose. And I think he's got the opportunity to be a 20 opportunity per game running back on what could be one of the best ascending offenses in the league with Aaron Rodgers coming in. You heard my case for Garrett Wilson. You can basically apply it to Breece Hall in terms of expectations for this offense.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if this time next year we're making arguments for taking Breece Hall like 102, 103 overall in drafts because we're like, hey, from weeks 4 to 17, when Breece Hall had the full workload, he was the RB1 in fantasy or the RB2 in fantasy or something like that. So I would not be shocked if that's the case. I'm living dying by the Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson sword, of course, as my RB1 and RB2 of my guys team here. My wide receiver 1 of my guys team is going to be Calvin Ridley, wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jaguars. We've been very staunch advocates that Calvin Ridley's still the same player that we last saw in 2020 and 2021. Trevor Lawrence, spoiler alert, is going to probably make an appearance on one of these lists as well. And I expect this Jags offense, with the pass attempts that they have to go around, with the pace of play that they showcased last year, to really, really be a fantasy goldmine. And that starts and ends with Calvin Ridley at wide receiver. I think he has legitimate wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 overall, or something like that in his range of outcomes. So with Calvin Ridley, you're getting an elite playmaker going to an ascending offense, an ascending quarterback. Sometimes fantasy football is not hard, man. Like Calvin Ridley went in the 2nd round of both of our home league drafts, but we've seen drafts where people got him in round 4, round 5, potentially on platforms like ESPN, where he's a little bit undervalued. So Ridley, man, I love him. He's my number 1 wide receiver league winner when I broke down the wide receiver league winners video, and he still is to this day. He has a monster ceiling, and he's absolutely worth the risk that he might not be quite the same player.
Love the take. This is a guy, by the way, when he was going in that third, fourth, 3-4 turn area on underdog prior to his, offseason camp hype. I was getting him all over the place. I think I finished with about 15% of Ridley because I was getting him when he was so cheap, right? Now, I mean, we're looking at it. If this guy did not miss a year and a half of football, he would legitimately be going inside of the top 12 picks or at the least going on the 1-2 turn. I think there could be a valid case where you would take him above AJ Brown, where you would take him above Devontae Adams, where you'd even take him maybe in the conversation of Amon or St. Brown and Garrett Wilson, because I do think he is a superstar level talent. So take advantage of it. If people are going to give you a huge discount because he hasn't played football in so long, or he might have gotten worse at football, use that to your advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is my my top 3 picks so far. Bijan's my RB1, Breece Hall's my RB2, Calvin Ridley's my wide receiver 1. What are you looking at in terms of your 10 or your 4th and 5th player here for your My Guys team?
Yeah, and I mean, staying the course, my third player is actually going to be Travis Etienne, which, I mean, staying there on the same team, right? We're talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. You made the bold claim that the Jaguars are going to be one of the breakout offenses-esque of the Eagles last year. And I fully agree. I think Travis Etienne is one of the best running backs in the NFL on a per carry basis. Literally one of the most efficient running backs in the entire league last year, despite coming off of that foot injury he suffered in his rookie season. More familiarity on the offense, obviously playing with his college quarterback there with Trevor Lawrence, obviously both playing at Clemson. Like we kind of said, we think this Jaguars offense is going to put up points in bunches. And let me just trust the running back one who's super efficient on a team that might afford him 12, 13, 14 plus rushing touchdown opportunities. I'm all for Travis Etienne. If you can get him in the third round, he could be your anchor running back. He could be your hero running back. Maybe you went Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs in your first and second round, and you could wrap up with a guy who holds the upside like Travis Etienne does. I'm all for it. So third round Etienne, sign me up. I think he's got a legitimate claim at top 5 overall status this year.
Yeah, it's funny because I literally started my draft Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen last night, and Travis Etienne was picked 1 pick ahead of me. So I took Breece Hall instead. I would rather have Travis Etienne just because of the slow start with Breece Hall.
Yep.
But for the most part, I'm totally on board. I'm not totally worried about Tank Bigsby. The market is, and that's why he's a My Guy. We're not worried about Tank Bigsby eating into the workload. We think he's more of a backup, change of pace type of guy.
Yep.
And Travis Etienne has, 12, 14 touchdown upside, maybe a little bit upside to increase his receiving workload, but overall a guy that I've drafted quite a bit of. I think I have him 15% on underdog as well. So
Around the same.
your other pick on this wrap up, who do you got?
Yeah, so my other pick, I couldn't just draft early, guys. I feel like everybody I've talked about thus far has basically just been like a top 3 round pick. So I will go a little bit guttier. This guy should be going off the board 8th, 9th, 10th round area, depending on how wide receiver heavy your league is. But I cannot get enough of Elijah Moore. And he's such a common theme of this channel. We were kind of known as the fantasy stock exchange Jets at some point these last couple of years with how, blue pilled we were on the Jets. But man, I still think he's the stud talent that I saw out of college. He's still the guy that I had a first round grade of coming out of Ole Miss. He's still that guy who showed in that 6-game sample size in his rookie year, he could be a legitimate difference maker at wide receiver. Gets that change of scenery, goes to the Cleveland Browns this offseason. The expectation right now is kind of, maybe he works in as the upside wide receiver 4, upside wide receiver 5 in fantasy lineups. Dude, if he stays fully healthy and Deshaun Watson bounces back the way I think he will, I think he's got a wide receiver 2 baseline. I think he could be a legitimate top 24, top 20 overall wide receiver in fantasy. And he's currently going again in the 8th, 9th, 10th round of your home leagues. If you start out with a double hero, or even if you start out with a 0 and you can get this guy as your second or your third flex, I think he's got, like I said, legitimate wide receiver 2 upside. So I don't think there's many other better picks in fantasy football right now than Elijah Moore. I have him, I think, at 22.5% ownership over on Underdog Fantasy.
Yeah, I have him right up there as well. I have him at 16%. So I have him. I'm pretty high as well. I drafted him last night in my home league draft. I drafted him at the 8-6 because we also have the added wrinkle that Amari Cooper is Amari Cooper and could disappear like he tends to do some seasons. It looks like he's almost like the Matt Ryan of wide receivers, where like every second season he kind of disappoints. And Elijah Moore, if like you said, if we believe Deshaun Watson, the reason we're higher on Elijah Moore also is because we are believers that Deshaun Watson is the quarterback that we saw for 4 years prior to the 6-game sample size last year. And if that happens and Elijah Moore is the talent that we think he can be, then he could have absolutely like this year's Christian Kirk type of appeal to fantasy football lineups this year. So your team, you got Travis Etienne, CeeDee Lamb, Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore as your My Guys. You got all your wide receivers filled out. I got all my running backs filled out. Now we get to my first pick coming back here. It will be Brandon Aiyuk. I think Aiyuk legitimately has the potential, and we talked about this in the bold predictions video as well, has the potential to not only outscore Deebo Samuel, not only outscore, a lot of wide receivers in his like relative range, because I picked him again last night in my home league draft. I picked him 5'7". I think this guy has wide receiver 1 upside legitimately. And the reason I think that is because I think this offense will probably center itself around more like deep passing, the way that Brock Purdy showed towards the end of the season that they were going to open things up in the red zone a little bit more, open things up deep down the field more. And Brandon Aiyuk every season has just performed. And when he's not been in the doghouse like he was for the first like 5 games of 2021, he's basically been a wide receiver 2 or better anytime he's been on the field. And that's with Deebo Samuel performing. That's with George Kittle on the field. That's with last year Christian McCaffrey coming to the 49ers and them being a run-heavy offense in general. If any of those factors go wrong, whether it's like McCaffrey getting injured or Deebo getting injured, or maybe Aiyuk just elevates his game because he's still a young player, he's playing for a big contract, I think Aiyuk legitimately could be a wide receiver 1 this year in fantasy, and I don't think that's priced into him right now. I think a lot of people view him as like the safe wide receiver 3, and he has wide receiver 2 baseline with wide receiver 1 upside.
Yeah, again, I keep making reference to this case, but it really does remind me of like Adam Thielen was a very, very good player in his prime. Deebo Samuel right now is a very, very good football player. But I think that if Brandon Aiyuk hits his ceiling, it could be a Stephon Diggs situation. It could be, the old Grizzly veteran that maybe people prefer in fantasy going into the year would be like in the Adam Thielen to Deebo Samuel. But when the opportunity comes for Stephon Diggs, aka Brandon Aiyuk, to get his opportunity, we could be looking at one of the legit difference makers in the entire league. A guy that Matt Harmon is all over. Obviously, we're all over as well. We think this offense is going to be very good. I think Brandon Aiyuk can ascend to being that number 1 target.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like, we also forget too, coming out of Arizona State, this was not a refined prospect. Yeah. He wasn't going to do what Garrett Wilson, Justin Jefferson did as rookies. Those guys were refined prospects when they came out. It shouldn't be surprising to us that Brandon Aiyuk's best career years come year 4, year 5, year 6, year 7 of his career, and not year 1 to 3, which, by the way, he's already been a wide receiver 2 anytime he's been on the field, year 1 to 3, as a raw prospect coming out of Arizona State. So yeah, I think this could be the year that we just see the Brandon Aiyuk explosion, and it would not shock me one bit. Another guy that I think is a refined prospect coming out of USC and the University of Pittsburgh, my flex position here, is Jordan Addison. Again, we've talked about the cases for Jordan Addison. Adam Thielen ran a lot of routes. Justin Jefferson can't do everything for that offense. We expect the Vikings to throw at a top 5 rate, run a top 5 pace of play type of offense. There is room for other pass catchers here. Even if TJ Hawkinson has a good season, even if Justin Jefferson's the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy, Jordan Addison has room to produce. He was a great prospect. He won the Biletnikoff at 19 years old. He basically got Kenny Pickett drafted in the first round because he was so productive, like 1,600 yards, 17 touchdowns, absolutely absurd production. And I've seen like one play of him in the preseason so far, and he had like a disgusting toe tap grab on the sideline. That's all I needed to see out of Jordan Addison. I literally knew he was already a stud prospect, and he's going to come in to an offense where he does not have to be the number 1. He does not have to take number 1 corners away. He's going to get to work as a Z flank or slot receiver against number 2 and number 3 defenders. I think Jordan Addison could have a monster season. Basically, even though Chris Olave was the number 1 receiver in New Orleans, he had like 1,100 yards and 4 touchdowns. I think we could see a better season out of Jordan Addison as the number 2, even if Justin Jefferson blows every receiver out of the water this year.
Yeah, it's so funny to me how people are like, well, he's competing with TJ Hawkinson. He's competing with Justin Jefferson. Like, what are the targets going to look like for Jordan Addison? Well, if you're just doing the baseline, just from a math standpoint, the Vikings are probably going to throw about 650 times this year, just like they did last year. It could be even closer to 675, 700, given the tendencies of Kevin O'Connell. Well, Jordan Addison already had a target commanding profile coming out of college. Even if he just reaches 20%, if he reaches a 20% target share, which I think is a very nice ceiling range of outcome, maybe even close to the median, honestly, given the talent I think we're at hand here with Jordan Addison, 20% of 650 would still be 130 targets. So if you're really worried about Jordan Addison losing targets to Jefferson, losing targets to Hawkinson, there's still so much of the pie left available for Jordan Addison to keep eating.
Yeah, like we could give Justin Jefferson 200 targets right now and TJ Hawkinson 140, and there would still be a ton left over for Jordan Addison. You said 675. I mean, they had 676 attempts last year with Dalvin Cook there. They cut their starting running back. They're probably going to continue to throw, and they also ran a lot in the red zone last year, and the touchdown upside, I think, of Cousins, Jefferson, Addison, and Hawkinson is even higher than it was for like Jefferson and Hawkinson with Minnesota last year. So yeah, Addison definitely. I mean, he's been basically a my guy since January when he was my wide receiver 1 in the rookie draft process. So yeah, I have to stand this guy. He is 100% somebody I've hitched my wagon to. I have 17% Jordan Addison on Underdog Fantasy as well. So far my lineup is Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, Calvin Ridley, Brandon Aiyuk, and Jordan Addison. Just my onesies remaining. What say you with your next 2 picks?
So in terms of my lineup, Travis Etienne, CeeDee Lamb, Garrett Wilson, and Elijah Moore. So my next 2 picks in a row, I'll start off with the first one, and I'm going to the tight end position. You guys would have heard me talk about him on my breakouts video. My number 1 breakout candidate, Kyle Pitts of the Atlanta Falcons. And the whole song and dance of Kyle Pitts right now is like, you either hate him or you fucking love him. You hate him because, Arthur Smith, low passing volume, hasn't done anything. He's a bust. Like, I've heard people call Kyle Pitts a bust, which is so ludicrous to me to talk about a 21-year-old tight end who put up 1,000 yards as a rookie being a bust. The pros of him, like I've outlined in all offseason, is the fact that this is still a tight end that commanded over 30% of his team's targets per run, commanded 34% of them as a second-year player. Is still 6'6", is still 245, still runs a 4.4, still went 4th overall in his own draft class, and is now on an ascending offense like you made the case for with Bijan Robinson, with Arthur Smith, and with the Atlanta Falcons. I think this is a team, like you said, with Bijan, can contend for 10, 11 wins, can contend for, that 4th seed in the NFC. And if that's going to happen, it's going to come on the concentrated offense between Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson. If you're really scared about Tyler Algier and, freaking Mac Hollins and all these other, Joes in this offense, don't be. The ones that we're looking for are the true difference makers, which is what Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson represent. And in terms of Kyle Pitts, you're getting literally wide receiver usage. People are complaining about his usage. You're getting wide receiver usage, deep targets, yak opportunity, scheming an offense around him. Only he's at the tight end position. If anybody's going to ascend to the Travis Kelce tier after this year, my money's on Kyle Pitts.
The guy scored 3 touchdowns in his career. You don't think the offensive production in the red zone is going to increase with number 7 in the backfield?
Oh yeah.
Even if Bijan is dominant in the red zone, that's going to open things up for the 6'6" tight end and the 6'5" wide receiver to be able to score some touchdowns in the red zone. This is why we're high on this Falcons offense. It's just like San Francisco. Like when we think of the San Francisco 49ers, when they got Christian McCaffrey, the first thing I thought of was, as a defensive coordinator, how the hell do you defend this team? Because you have Christian McCaffrey, you have Deebo Samuel, you have Brandon Aiyuk, and you have George Kittle. The same light case can be made for the Falcons. It's like, even if Desmond Ridder is as good as Brock Purdy, which I don't think is an outrageous take, considering everybody preferred Desmond Ridder in the draft last year to Brock Purdy, how are you going to defend Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, and Drake London? How are you going to do it?
You can't. You physically can't. They have playmakers, top 10 level draft capital playmakers at all 3 major important offensive positions with wide receiver, tight end, and running back. So,
and a great offensive line, for what it's worth, too. A very good offensive line, the best run blocking line in the league, and it wasn't close last year type of offensive line.
Yeah, no, I'm all for it. I'm all for Atlanta. I think, like we kind of said, they are better than the Saints. They are better than the Bucs. They are better than the Panthers. They are going to win the NFC South. I'll just make that bold take in this video right now. If you're a Saints fan, you want to complain, go down to the comment section. But that's how I view this offense. That's how I view this NFC South outlook. We go on to my number 6, my guy, and we head back to the running back position. And you already talked about an ACL running back, so I'm just going to talk about another one. I'm going to talk about our boy himself, Javonte Williams, running back of the Denver Broncos. A guy that was my guy for us last year. He was going in the 2nd round. We were all over. Obviously, for our sake, dealing with that injury, not really the greatest sign, but now we're getting him in the 7th round. Every report we've heard thus far is that this guy's fully healthy, fully ready to go. We saw him command basically a 50-50 opportunity split between him and P. Ryan in the preseason. And now the offense has the opportunity to explode, bringing in Sean Payton, Russell Wilson, potential bounce back this year. I think if Javonte Williams stays healthy, which I do think at this point, we have no reason to think why he shouldn't be healthy, week 4, week 5 on, like the case you made with Breece Hall, I think it could be, 90% of what Breece Hall represents. Maybe Breece Hall's got that top 2, top 3 ceiling. I think if Javonte Williams stays healthy, he could be a top 5 to 8 running back in the entire NFL. And for fantasy football purposes, you can wait on him until the 7th round. You can get him at the 705 in your draft, the 707 in your draft, and get a legitimate high-end running back 1 to mid-end running back 1 once he gets back to full speed.
It's funny because in my home league draft last night, I took Mike Williams at the 6'6", and one of these 2 players was who I was praying fell back to me, Kyle Pitts or Javonte Williams. I play in a tight end premium league, and I got Kyle Pitts at the 7-7 because
Nuts.
people are just so off of him. Javonte went actually the pick before me, but still, I mean, those two guys. The crazy thing too is there's two major narratives in fantasy football this year that I think could be broken. There's a lot of narratives out there, but two that I think will be broken this year. The ACL tear running back narrative. I think Breece Hall and Javonte Williams will both break it. And the rookie tight end narrative or the young tight end narrative. And I think Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laporta, all these guys are going to help contribute to those. Those are the two biggest narratives that I think are going down in flames this year.
Agreed. No, I agree. And you mentioned Sam Laporta. You mentioned the other rookie tight ends. I think even Luke Musgrave looks pretty promising. Don't want to be too biased, but I think if Jake Ferguson works into the role, I think he could be very promising this year. There's a lot of late round tight ends at this point where honestly in home leagues, man, unless I'm getting a Kyle Pitts plus tight end, I'm more than fine bypassing the Njokus, the Freiermuths, the mid-tier tight ends, and just stacking up at the last two rounds of my draft, assuming you don't have a kicker defense. Those are obviously the last two, but last two rounds of your draft, taking shots on Laporta, taking shots on Musgrave, taking shots on Ferguson, even taking shots like if you like Chicken Combo, go take him. Michael Mayer, go take him. There's so many nice upside shot tight ends this year that the mold is bound to be broke.
Yeah, exactly. So my final two picks here, I'll go rapid fire with my onesies. I have George Kittle actually as my guy at the tight end position. I've drafted him in 18% of my underdog drafts because again, similar to what I said with Brandon Aiyuk, I just think this offense is very difficult to defend and I want pieces of it. And George Kittle is actually the most affordable, generally speaking, of those pieces because McCaffrey's going high, Debo's going high. I would rather fade those two guys and get my exposure to the 49ers via Brandon Aiyuk and George Kittle.
Agreed.
Because I think there's a legitimate case to be made that all four of these guys are equivalent talents at their position. So just give me the cheapest options. And George Kittle, while he's injury prone and blah, 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 everybody has these narratives against him. He has game breaking upside. And ask Pat Kerrane if you don't believe me, because he literally won the guy $2 million last year because of George Kittle's elite week winning upside that he can give you. And also last year, as we've talked about in numerous videos, he scored 7 touchdowns in the 9 games that Brock Purdy started, which is more than any single season output that George Kittle has put. And it's the reason he had a monster season, 11 touchdowns on the year, is because most of those came with Brock Purdy.
I mean, there's a reason why 2 years ago, this guy was legitimately going back-to-back in drafts with Travis Kelce. Are we forgetting that he was literally viewed on the same tier with Travis Kelce just 2 years ago? When are you ever going to tell me that George Kittle is as cheap as he is right now? He's like going off the board as the tight end 5, the tight end 6, in a lot of your drafts, when I can make the argument from a talent perspective, only Travis Kelce is more talented than George Kittle. If George Kittle can get back to that level of involvement we saw a couple years ago, which is a talented enough player to be able to do so, they finally got that quarterback they can trust on a down-and-down basis if Brock Purdy materializing. We could be looking at the next 1,000 yards, 12-plus receiving touchdowns, and maybe 90% of what Kelce does this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And then my other onesie is to stack with my wide receiver 1. Calvin Ridley was my wide receiver 1 pick. Trevor Lawrence is my quarterback pick because I literally have $50 on this guy to win MVP because I think he has this year's, one of my bold predictions was the Jaguars are this year's Eagles. They're going to be the breakout offense. They're going to be the team that has a top 3 points per game type of season. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to take yet another step in his career development. Third-year quarterback. I mean, we saw Jalen Hurts do it last year as a third-year quarterback. Trevor Lawrence, of course, one of the most prolific prospects we've ever seen. Wiped out rookie season because of Urban Meyer. Second year comes in. By the end of the season, he's leading his team to comebacks. He's willing them to win. He can do it on the ground, through the air. The thing that people forget about Trevor Lawrence, I think everybody views Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence as the same quarterback when it comes to fantasy. This guy legitimately can run and ran more than Justin Herbert, a lot more in fantasy football terms. So people forget that Trevor Lawrence has a legitimate 400 rushing yard, 5 to 7 touchdown upside on the ground, in addition to MVP caliber play with his arm. And with the Ridley, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby type of core that he has, I expect this guy to take a monster step this year. And I want pieces of this Jaguars offense, whether it's Lawrence, whether it's Ridley, whether it's Etienne, whether it's Kirk, whether it's Ingram. I don't care. I want pieces of this offense because I think Lawrence is going to smash this year.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's funny because with Trevor Lawrence, he kind of always goes as the last quarterback of the elite group. I feel like the tier break between him and Watson, after Lawrence goes, the next best quarterback is Watson. So, which I love Watson, don't get me wrong, but I would much rather have Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence usually go in the 5th round, 6th round area. And I would much rather wait on Trevor Lawrence in that range than I would maybe even take Joe Burrow in the third round, to be honest, because I do think if Trevor Lawrence materializes, top 3 overall quarterback is in the range of outcomes for him if the offense is as good as we think it can be. So love that Trevor Lawrence call. And I'm just going to stay at quarterback with mine. And I'm going to wrap up this video with the quarterback 1 in my rankings and your rankings, yet not quite viewed that way across the industry. Josh Allen. And I know it's low-hanging fruit. I'm picking at literally a quarterback that has finished as the quarterback 1 before, that obviously has one of the best arms in the league with the mobility he has. But I just want to tell you my expectation for Josh Allen compared to the market. The market kind of views, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen on a basic same level in terms of 4-point and 6-point passing touchdown leagues. My expectation is that if Josh Allen stays fully healthy and reaches the ceiling that I think he can be a tier above those guys. Let's just say those guys are, 25, 26 points per game. There is a range of outcome given his legs, given the 45 plus passing touchdown ceiling I see for Josh Allen, that he could just flat out have a Lamar Jackson in 2019 year, Patrick Mahomes in 2018 year, legitimately contending for 28, 29, 30 points per game in 4-point passing touchdown leagues. He's a guy that I would be comfortable taking in the mid-second round of my drafts in a normal 4-point passing touchdown league. Obviously, if you have accelerators, it's a 6-point, or if you have yardage bonuses, I'm sure you're going to get into in a second. Mid-second round is basically the baseline for him, but I would be comfortable taking him ahead of Jalen Waddle, taking him ahead of Chris Olave, taking him ahead of all of those, 2-3 turn running backs and wide receivers, because I think Josh Allen is that level ahead of any other fantasy football quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I drafted him in the second round last night in my home league draft because we do have quarterback accelerators, and I picked Stephon Diggs in the first round, so I stacked them up together. I think it's pretty crazy what Josh Allen could accomplish this year in that type of format. When I think about it, just again, from a real football standpoint, the way we've just kind of done with the Falcons and with the 49ers, this offense is kind of coming together, right? You have Stephon Diggs, who's been your steady Eddie for a number of years. Gabe Davis is in a contract year. He was a player that needed some development coming out of school. What if he takes a step forward? Dalton Kincaid, slot receiver, slot tight end. He could be a mismatch for people. And he also was a bit of an older prospect. He might be pro ready right away. James Cook looks like he's coming into his own. He's a pass-catching running back primarily. Those points go to Josh Allen as well. I think this offense is the best setup they've ever been to make a run in the AFC. And of course, there's a lot of urgency with this team right now because they've been so close. They've been in the playoffs. They've, just lost to Kansas City in that divisional round game a couple years ago. I think Josh Allen and the Bills could absolutely crush this year. Like you said, we know that Josh Allen's going high in drafts. We're not saying he's a my guy because we think he's going to be good this year. We're saying he's a my guy, or you're saying he's a my guy because he might be the best quarterback and it might not even be close this year.
I think there could be legitimately like a 2-3 point per game difference between him and the field. And for what it's worth, I mean, we've seen this level of upside before, but if we can see it put together with the best weapons group he's had, like I said, 45 passing touchdowns, 700 rushing yards, maybe another 8 to 9 rushing touchdowns as well. I think he's the only quarterback in the NFL, realistically, outside of maybe Patrick Mahomes because of how good he is with his arm, that can contend for 50 touchdowns from scrimmage.
Yeah, and the division also got better. There's going to be more shootouts in that division. The Dolphins can score points. The Jets should be able to score points. The Patriots might be the only snail-paced offense in the division right now. And, of course, in the AFC, you got to play the Bengals. You got to play the Chiefs. You got to play all those teams. And the Bills' offense is going to have to score. And it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And I'm very glad, when it comes to this video, we've hitched our wagons to the Jaguars, the Bills, the Falcons, the 49ers, like the Jets. Those teams, I feel comfortable in. And it's being slightly ahead of market on these offenses that gives you the edge in your fantasy football draft. So real quick, I'm going to recap my guys team. You guys should see a graphic on the screen right now, and then Danny can recap his. At quarterback, I got Trevor Lawrence. Running back 1, Bijan Robinson. Running back 2, Breece Hall. Wide receiver 1, Calvin Ridley. Wide receiver 2, Brandon Aiyuk. Tight end 1, George Kittle. And then my flex option is Jordan Addison. This is my team of my guys. If these age like shit, you can tell me in the comment section. Come back to this video and be like, I can't believe you told me to draft Breece Hall in the 3rd round. He played 4 games last year or whatever. These are my guys. These are the guys I'm hitching my wagon to, and my underdog percentages reflect this. So don't worry. If you draft these guys and they stink, I'm going to feel it too.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a ton of skin in the game. We have like over 150 entries, 150 on BBM, 20 plus in terms of the puppy and everything. Like, we have a ton of skin in the game when it comes to these guys. So don't just think, we're saying, oh, this, and we have like $0 invested. Like, we have hundreds, close to thousands of dollars invested in these players right now. In terms of my team, Josh Allen at the quarterback position. My running backs are Travis Etienne and Javonte Williams. Similar to Breece Hall, if Javonte Williams fucking doesn't recover from his knee injury and busts by week 6, roast me in the comments section. Wide receiver 1, CeeDee Lamb. Wide receiver 2, Garrett Wilson. At tight end, I have Kyle Pitts. And then finally, at my flex position, Elijah Moore.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are our My Guys teams. Again, let us know in the comments, who are your guys this year? Who do you love? Do you love some of our calls? Do you think we're stupid? We both have an ACL tear running back. I'm sure we're going to hear about that in the comment section. But like I said, I think these guys break the mold. I think they're the ones that actually achieve the running back production that we've so often not seen from running backs coming off of ACL tears, because they're hitting all the peripherals that we need them to hit. So leave a like at this video if you guys enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here. Of course, our weekly rankings, now that drafts are mostly done, if you guys want our weekly start sit rankings to help you out during the season, as well as all of the matchup charts and all that good stuff, you can get access to that by depositing just $10 on Underdog Fantasy. We made reference to them throughout this video. Best Ball Mania 4 hasn't quite filled yet, so if you want to get your share of 15 million in total prizes, using promo code FSE will give you 100% back up to $100. So if you put in $100, you'll have another 100 on the site, $200 total to play with. And if you do that, you'll get access to our weekly rankings totally for free. And all you have to deposit is a minimum of $10. And of course, you can get access to our weekly rankings throughout the season on flockfantasy.com as well. Use the promo code FSE over there for 30% off. And also, we should have a bonus live stream every single week for Flock Fantasy site subscribers only. So if you want to make sure you're getting your questions answered in depth, in detail by us on a live stream, that is another way that you can get that over on Flock Fantasy. Only promo code FSE users will have access to that, though. So make sure that you use our promo code and not, Mason's promo code or another channel's promo code. So with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.